Welcome to...
You need to be on the recording too, here.
Hello. Welcome everyone to our last day of Smart Immigration to the Future. And I present you Olya Vvedenskaya, who is also a doctor and a medical doctor, and not like we all fake doctors are. And with no further ado, let's hear you talk about how we should not be afraid of fat.
Thank you so much. Such a nice, amazing crowd today. Thank you all so much. Only 25% of people that I know, usually 75%. Yes, today I'm going to talk about fat and why we actually shouldn't be afraid of it. When I heard first about this conversation, I thought, how can I actually contribute to the topic? And I think at the end we should all be healthy by the time the future is there. So it's better if we take care of it right now in a meaningful and mindful way rather than let it slide by itself. A friend of mine, Alona, did some illustrations for this talk, so I'm also super grateful that she contributed. Why am I talking about it today? I studied medicine originally, and I worked on my MD thesis in lipids. Actually, it was devoted to traumatic brain injury in lipids, and then I did my Ph.D. in University in Charité here, studying multiomics of cancer diseases and precancerous conditions, and then I did another postdoc, I did another academic term as a postdoc in Dresden, again coming back to lipids. And after that I moved to industry, and now I'm taking care of science communication. But so, since we have plenty of time today, I thought, let's address a couple of other topics. So, if you look at my, like this. If you look at my lifeline, starting from the medical university, it looks okay, but actually here I started one attempt for the PhD, then I started another one, and then only from this one I actually eventually defended, I submitted, and then got my postdoc. Now what's interesting in this case is that I did have some major episodes, depressive episodes here, but the ones that were done or lived through during the conscious life, one was here, another one was here, and so I thought, how can we do something to prevent it in academia? So with that, I started some mental health initiative in the months lab that I was working at the same time. I co-founded a international academic mental health non-profit, and then I moved to industry. I had a little less time, and eventually I co-founded a non-profit that is now based in Germany, where we're helping early career researchers to build their career consciously. So, drop me a line. If you have a kid who needs some career guidance, there is a chance our network will be having some support instruments and tools. And then I actually thought, okay, where can I make some money and not step in the lab ever again? I did more than 10 years of mass spectrometry. The biggest issue for me emotionally was that I was coming back to the lab in the morning, and I was not sure whether my samples ran properly or not. In particular, I had issues with cholesterol, which we're going to talk about today. But cholesterol is a bitch. If you want to analyze it by mass spectrometry, it doesn't really fly well with the standard settings. And so I thought, how can I make sure that I'm never bothered by this issue ever again in my life? So I moved to science communication, and here we are. This talk and many other talks I give are part of science communication and outreach. What are we going to talk about today? I don't know, Valer, what is your background? Okay. Okay, so you guys know or should know a couple of things about molecules. I'm not going to put it to the test today, but I rely then on your knowledge knowledge, and probably as chemists, you know much more about chemistry part of molecules. So I'm going to talk about the biological meaning and applications of it today with you. Lipids. What are lipids? This is a molecule. Here we are. I mean, there are many, like 7,000 different ones, and I cannot name all of them, or maybe even half I cannot. But in principle, most of them have hydrophilic head and hydrophobic tails. 2, 1, 3, 4, something along these lines. But let's do it S2 today and talk about them. So, because more updated knowledge in my presentation, more than 9,000 individual lipid species can be produced by bodies, by organisms. And of course, like lipids produced by Drosophila are different from human, are different from other insects or C. elegans. But in general, they all follow pretty much this scheme. Now, why do they matter? They matter for many, many reasons. I cannot list all of them, of course, here. But probably, in my opinion, one of the most important ones is that they're part of cell membrane structure. Cells are the building blocks of our organism, and they build cell membrane. They, of course, are responsible for energy storage and supply. And then, when it comes to everyday life, some of them can be measured in blood. And this is what we're mostly going to talk about today. And then, of course, they're responsible for hormonal balance, many lipids. So many hormones are cholesterol and sterol-based, so many of them are based on lipid structure, and that's why we should not fear them, because they are very, very important for our life. First, we're going to talk about cell membrane structure as probably the core one. So here we see the cell, and cell membrane is this thing that surrounds the cell, and it basically separates the cell and what is inside the cell from what is outside of the cell. This is how a simplified way to show the cell membrane, but it's actually just by lipid layers. So this is one layer up here and another one at the bottom, and because we see that these hydrophilic heads are trying to go close to the water, but hydrophobic tails are not allowing this to happen, this structure stays more or less stable in the conditions allowing to support the life. Of course, they can be different, as I mentioned. These ones are phospholipids. This one is cholesterol, I would say. So here we see fatty acids can be different, so they can be saturated, so-called saturated, which means that they're not, these legs are not super wobbly, meaning that they're much more rigid. Again, if you actually all have studied organic chemistry, I apologize for womansplaining, but this is the talk I prepared, so bear with me. So we see the saturated fatty acids, then we see sometimes it can be one saturated, one monounsaturated, so it has one degree of freedom, so it can be actually moving around here, and sometimes it can be polyunsaturated fatty acids, and they're much more flexible. Why is it important? It's important because our membranes should be flexible to adjust to the changes of environment. And therefore, membranes should be flexible, and the more, or like to a certain degree, we should try to enrich our membranes with polyunsaturated fatty acids. Omega-3, omega-6, all those things that you've heard by our fabulous friends from marketing. Membranes allow some components to diffuse through them, and sometimes there are, of course, some channels, and mostly they're responsible for adaptation to changes. May it be stress, may it be different temperature, may it be different chemical, UV light exposure, many other things. So now you know this part, it's very important, it actually is at the core of life. Of course, another aspect is energy storage and supply. It's probably one of the most known aspects of lipid function and the most stigmatized one, of course, as we know now. Energy storage in the body, so if we do the abdominal scan like this, through this axis, then we might see some So this is lean, sort of like a body type, and then we can see that some fat can be stored as visceral fat, some can be stored as subcutaneous fat outside and between skin and body, and then this is the fat that can be stored between organs. And this is how mainly it's stored, the fat is stored inside the body, and then in case of need, actually, so here, this fat in yellow, it's stored in the cells called adipocytes. Of course, fat can be stored in many other types of cells, in liver and so on and so forth, but mostly the cells that were created for the function of storing cell is the cells called adipocytes. So you see the cell membrane, which we've talked about today. These are cell organelles that are kind of pushed to the edge, and this is a big ass huge lipid droplets, consisting of small lipid droplets, kind of. Inside there, you see this smaller lipid droplets, how they are organized. One thing that distinguishes their membrane from the living cell organism membrane is that they actually, instead of bilayer, they have monolayer. So as you can see here, there's only one layer, lipid layer, and inside, and of course they have some proteins, some channels in the membrane, on the membrane, but mostly the fats are being stored in the form of triglycerols and sterile esters, which are slightly different. So they do have 3 fatty acids instead of 2, and therefore when our body needs energy, they start chopping these fatty acids one by one and converting them into energy. So therefore this is triacylglycerol, then this way it becomes 3, 2, and monosylglycerols then. And so this is the way how our body stores and then releases the energy. So this becomes 2. The way I see it is that this is like a huge plastic bag with a lot of plastic bags that we store in the kitchen. And this is, I think, a very decent analogy, because when we don't need this, we come back from home, we have, from the grocery shop, we have 3 plastic bags, we kind of like pack them somehow and forget them till the time we need it. So unfortunately, if we do excessive shopping, sometimes we store more of these plastic bags and they're like, might not be properly ordered inside and stuff like this, so we actually need to keep an eye on this bag with plastic bags, because this is the way our organism is, trying to store it all. Now, it's in Russian. I think I did it for one Russian community to open that. So these particular tags are called fats. The rest of the molecules are called lipids. So when we're talking about fats, what we actually factually mean is those things. The others are called lipids. So lipids are much more than just fats, but fats are probably one of the parts of the lipids that are the most known. Now, are lipids good or bad? The sort of like popular culture is trying to label them bad, and mostly this is based on how do they come to our body and from what kind of food they're coming to our body. This is a very common scheme that I found. So they're saying that they're like trans fats, which are like super processed, and they have this coming from fast food, cakes, chocolate, deep fried food, and then the saturated fats, which you have seen already. So like with these 2 legs, 2 fatty acids that are saturated, bless you, and then they can be like more or less split on vegetable fats and animal fats, and then of course you know that you've heard this palm oil, then it's like vegetable fats, and then some butter, ghee, and some sour, full cream, dairy products. All this is animal fats. And then there are so-called unsaturated fats, which we have already talked about today, omega-3, omega-6, polyunsaturated fatty acids, and then they are coming from fish, nuts. Nuts are amazing for health, so-called healthy fats. Now, I personally have a big problem with this scheme and many of such, because they label some foods as good foods and some foods are bad foods. But in principle, the food is there for us not only to supply us with the energy that we need. Comfort food is usually coming from here, or the commonly known comfort food. Can we really say that the comfort food is bad? I cannot really say, and I don't feel like we should say that, pizza and burgers and chocolate are bad, because they're just fulfilling another function for us, whether it's like mental health support, comfort food and whatnot. But still, I feel like labeling and sort of like making some particular products as, as a villain, is stigmatizing them to the extent that we get some deep fries, French fries, and then we guilt trip ourselves because we ate some bad food. It's not the case in my opinion. It's all about the balance. So of course we need to get this kind of food. That goes without saying. Of course, it's nice to eat healthy food, but what I'm trying to say is I don't think we should be guilt-tripping ourselves for eating burger or French fries, because they just take care of another function in our body and mind. Now, another thing that I think we all should know is that fats are not, and lipids are not only responsible for themselves, sort of, they're also responsible for fat-soluble vitamins. Fat-soluble vitamins are very, very important vitamins that we are getting from outside, except for, I think, vitamin D, which we can produce with the sun exposure. The rest we need to get with the external food, and importantly, these vitamins get absorbed to our body only when they're diluted in fat. So they should be dissolved in fat, and they don't really go inside our bodies if they are diluted in water. Which means that water-soluble food supplies with these vitamins are not really doing you much favor, and you need to make sure that you consume these vitamins, namely A, D, E, and K, with some sort of fat. For example, eating carrot as is, which has a lot of vitamin A, is not as efficient for vitamin supply compared to if you mix it with sour cream or with some oil. So please keep this in mind. Another important thing that we also need to keep in mind is that as much as they can go in our body without fat, they also cannot simply leave our body, because they are integrated, so they go through the cell membrane, which is fat, and then it's not that easy to get rid of them. Meaning that while it's very difficult to get an overdose of vitamin C, because it's going to be excreted with urine, these guys you can sort of like easily overdose yourself with. So keep this in mind. It doesn't necessarily mean that an overdose of these vitamins actually come with some health consequences. So keep this in mind and don't push your body through excessive amounts of fat-soluble vitamins. We are coming to the whole part, I think, closer to now let's figure out how we can see what's going on in our blood. Basically, how lipids get absorbed. So this is the gut cell. Here is the gut lumen, and this way the food and the nutrients can go into the cell. Then it goes to the bloodstream, and then it goes to the liver. Liver is the main factory for us to process all this fats, toxins, many other things. So liver is a hard working organ, working day and night. The way lipids are being absorbed into our body is here. So triglycerides, phospholipid, and some other lipids and lipoproteins are being absorbed this way. In the form of lipoproteins. So kilomicrons and then lipoproteins. So basically this is again one layer of phospholipids with some occasional cholesterol and some proteins here and there. Inside there's triglycerides, and you see there's also some cholesterol esters. This is how this is the structure that travels through our body in the blood. And this is something that we can measure in the blood eventually to evaluate our lipid status of the body. You probably all heard about good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. So, very low density lipoprotein is basically like, I think it's based on how do they like separate in, don't count me, like my idea is, I think that's based how they separate in the centrifuge probably. We'll cut this part out. Just in case if I bullshitted somewhere. So basically what we need to know is that when we're going to our house host, then they will be able to see what kind of like good or bad, I mean like good, so bad, very low density protein, we should have them a little less, and then high density proteins, we should have them high because they are the ones that are transporting cholesterol outside of our body, and we need to have it, this feedback loop working properly. What we typically measure in the blood is total cholesterol or total cholesterol, which means it's a summary of all these things. Which means that if you measure total cholesterol, it probably wouldn't give you a whole idea which cholesterol you have and which one should you keep an eye on, whether it's so-called good or so-called bad. So total cholesterol or total cholesterol doesn't really give us an idea of what's going on unless it's like spiking. So high density lipoproteins, they travel through our blood veins and blood vessels and don't leave any kind of like bad trace. Low density lipoproteins, however, are responsible and or taking part in building plaques, which is eventually, if this gap is closes, leads us to strokes and other ischemic low blood supply or no blood supply consequences in organs of our body. Fun fact: 70 to 80% of our cholesterol is produced by our liver, which means that essentially with your diet you can only affect 20 to 30%. That doesn't sound fair if you ask me, because you can keep all the healthy diet you want if your liver is sort of like on the path to create as much cholesterol as it can, then you'll need to take care of with other means. Namely, getting some medication that prevents your liver from producing tons of this bad cholesterol or so-called bad cholesterol. This is the medication that is usually prescribed for life, but because of this thing, I hope I convinced you that we all need to take this medication if our liver is misbehaving, because this is not what we can affect in many cases. And if your liver is producing this so-called bad cholesterol, then medication for life will probably do you a good favor in preventing strokes and other problems with blood supply when it comes to plaques. Now, what you can see basically in your blood. Total cholesterol, you now know what it is. You are well prepared to go into doctor houses. Triglycerides, well, if you eat super fatty food the day before or like the night before you go and give your blood test, this is what we'll probably see in your blood. High density lipoprotein cholesterol, you will see low density lipoprotein. This is a very standard analysis lipid profile. Is there more? Yes, there is more. Actually, this is like normal things, but this is Googleable. It's not too interesting, but now at least you are well prepared to talk to your house about it. There are other things that are now being more and more introduced into routine checks. ApoB is apolipoprotein B, so basically this is like a particle which has cholesterol inside. And these ApoB particles are particularly responsible for triggering the plaque buildup, and this is something one can measure. And lipoprotein A is this thing, MAPG here, and this is the one that shows your genetic predisposition. So it's not only, actually this one is not showing what you eat, but rather like how it will work all independent of what you eat. So these are two additional things that you can measure to be more aware of what's going on. There are tons of other things, but I think this is a good idea to start with. Then you can also measure some inflammation markers, but overall, what I wanted to show you today is that we shouldn't really be scared of doing the lipid test, rather than we should do it and know what we're dealing with. So what do we now know about lipids? We know that they are essential parts of every cell in our body, let's put it this way. They are responsible for the cell membrane. Then, of course, they are responsible for energy storage and supply. This we all know from all over. Vitamin absorption, they're essential for fat-soluble vitamins. Now you know that you have to all be mindful about it. And maybe next time I'll tell you more about hormones, or maybe how all this metabolism is getting screwed during the obesity or metabolic syndrome, and maybe other pathologies. Now you think, oh my God, I want to know more about lipids. And maybe I want to tell my kids about lipids. You can do that too. We have created a couple of board games that are available. One is called Lipodrome, another one is called Know Your Fats. And you can download them. I don't think they're not on sale or something. There's just open access project from the scientific community, where you can, in the format of board games, learn a little more about lipids. And this is my pride, my baby, is lipid personality test. So you go there, it's on the platform for the company that I work for called Lipitype, and then you can learn what kind of lipid you are. There are, I think, like 10 or 13 or 12, around 10 different types of lipids, and then you can learn about yourself a little, and then you can learn a little about lipids. So if you want to learn more, here it is for you. Once again, I don't think you should be afraid of lipids. I think you just need to be equipped with knowledge and actionable items. Questions?